We're talking about elements of a plot diagram in reading. And the different elements in a plot diagram are kind of like puzzle pieces that you put together in order to show the entire plot in a story. So this is my plot diagram here that I've drawn. And plot is the organized pattern or the sequence of events that make up a story. And we're going to be taking a look at all these parts today. The first part we're going to talk about is the exposition. And if you notice here on my plot diagram is the very first position. This is the very first thing that happens, is the beginning of the story. This is where you start the story, the exposition, and it's the place where you have an introduction of the characters, the setting, and the main conflict. So the very first part of a plot diagram is the exposition. The second part in the plot diagram, after the exposition, immediately comes the rising action. And this is the part of the story that starts to build the conflict in the story. It's a building of interest or suspense that occurs during the rising action. Now, if you notice my plot diagram here, we've talked about exposition, we've talked about the rising action, and at the very, very top is the climax of the story. The main character usually comes face to face with conflict at this point in the story. The main character somehow changes, and this is the part of the story where you're going, it's almost like a cliffhanger. What's going to happen? And this is the very turning point of the story, the climax. So we have an exposition, we have rising action, and the climax. The next part in a plot diagram, we have exposition, we have the rising action, we have the climax, and then we have the falling action. When you're at the climax, you're at just the peak of the story, and then it settles down just a little bit. You start going downhill just a little bit. All of the loose ends in the plot are starting to tie up. The conflict and the climax are finally taken care of. And the last part of a plot diagram is the resolution. We've gone with the exposition, we've had rising action all the way up to the climax, and then we've had falling action, and then you have resolution. And resolution is the part in the story where it comes to a reasonable ending.